The story begins inside a cramped cell. We see a paper crane sitting on a windowsill, a small touch of life in a very bleak room. A young man named Iguchi Tatsuya is sitting on the floor, breathing heavily. You can see the sweat on his face and the tension in his eyes. He clenches his teeth, clearly struggling with the mental toll of being locked away in solitary confinement. Tatsuya starts banging against the walls, creating enough noise to draw the attention of the guards outside. They've seen this before, shouting for him to knock it off. This isn't his first time acting out in the solitary wing. The guards recognize him instantly. Despite their warnings, the banging continues, showing just how restless he's become behind those bars. We jump ahead 6 months to the Kanto region. The cramped walls of the prison are replaced by wide shots of a busy city. It's a complete contrast to where we started: crowded streets, tall buildings, and the constant hum of urban life. Tatsuya is finally back in the world he left behind. Tatsuya stands on a pedestrian bridge, looking out over the city. He's dressed simply in a t-shirt and jeans, carrying only a single duffel bag. He looks a bit older now, but he still has that same sharp, intense expression. After half a year away, he's officially back on the streets, standing in the middle of a world that didn't stop moving without him. We get a closer look at him as he introduces himself. His name is Iguchi Tatsuya, and he's just 17. He's originally from Komae, Tokyo. He describes his 6 months in juvie as a long vacation in Nagano that ended just a few hours ago. You can see the scars on his hand as he adjusts his shirt, a small hint at his violent past. Tatsuya explains why he was arrested. He was part of a gang called the Tokyo Komae Outlaws, specifically the 5th generation. We see a photo of them lined up, looking like a serious threat. He mentions that the police used to be his playmates, showing just how often he was involved in run-ins with the law before he was finally sent away. He was the head of their special forces, which explains the newspaper headline we see: Bosozoku attack police in Shinjuku. The report mentions 13 gang members arrested and 6 officers seriously injured. When Tatsuya asks himself if he regrets it, he admits that he does, though his facial expression suggests he still carries a bit of that old wild energy. Reality sets in when we meet Ishido, Tatsuya's parole officer. Tatsuya calls him an old fart, but acknowledges the power the man holds. Tatsuya has to report to Ishido once a month to give an account of his life. If Ishido hears even a whisper of Tatsuya getting into trouble, he has the power to send him right back to juvie. Tatsuya looks up at the massive city buildings and realizes the weight of his situation. He's out, but he's not truly free. He's on parole, which means he's living under a microscope. Every step he takes is monitored, and the consequences for slipping up are immediate. Ishido takes Tatsuya to a charcoal yakiniku restaurant called Sanru. The paperwork is finished, and Tatsuya meets a woman who seems to be running the place. She doesn't waste any time, telling Tat-chan that he's going to be working his butt off starting tomorrow. It's a new chapter for him, trading gang fights for hard work in a kitchen. Tatsuya is clearly distracted, his mind wandering as he looks at a beer poster featuring a woman in a bikini. Ishido notices his lack of focus and snaps at him, asking if he's even listening. Tatsuya quickly snaps back to reality, wiping drool from his chin as he realizes the woman running the restaurant is actually his aunt on his mother's side. He admits that moving here, away from his hometown, was part of a specific plan for his life after juvie. Ishido lays out the harsh truth. He reminds Tatsuya that he was such a troublemaker in juvenile hall that he was nearly transferred to a different, more secure facility. He demands that Tatsuya show his aunt the respect she deserves for taking him in. Ishido looks him dead in the eye, questioning if Tatsuya is actually serious about turning over a new leaf or if this is all just an act. The parole officer doesn't hold back his cynicism. Based on his years of experience seeing kids like Tatsuya come and go, he gives a grim prediction: at this rate, Tatsuya is guaranteed to end up back in juvenile hall. As Ishido finishes his lecture with a smug smile, Tatsuya's aunt watches the interaction, her expression much softer and more hopeful than the officer's. Tatsuya suddenly slams his hands onto the table and bows deeply, shocking both Ishido and his aunt. He stammers out a sincere thank you to his aunt for taking in someone like him and asks her to take care of him from now on. He reflects on the conditions of his release, noting that one of the main requirements for his rehabilitation was moving somewhere far away from his old friends, who were considered a bad influence. His aunt leads him out back to a small, weathered building behind the restaurant. She explains that this room used to belong to a former employee and that he can stay here until his shifts start. She adds a bit of reality to the situation, mentioning that the rent for the room will be subtracted directly from his salary. Tatsuya looks at the simple living space, realizing this is where his new life truly begins. Tatsuya looks at his aunt and promises to do his best, thanking her again for everything. She laughs and tells him to lighten up already, trying to ease the heavy tension. She reminds him that his parole only lasts for about a year and that as long as he takes his work seriously, everything will be fine. Tatsuya looks down, seemingly taking her words to heart. In a private moment of reflection, Tatsuya admits the honest truth to himself. He never wants to go back to juvie, not because he suddenly wants to be a good person, but because the punishments there were so severe he never wants to endure them again. We see a final shot of a discarded paper crane on the ground, a reminder of the prison cell he left behind. Walking through the city, Tatsuya wonders if he actually has what it takes to change for real. He feels like he's starting over from scratch in a completely unfamiliar place. He admits to himself that he's currently as far removed from his ideal self as possible, and if anyone asked if he actually liked who he was right now, he wouldn't be able to say yes. However, the serious mood doesn't last long. As Tatsuya walks past a group of girls, his old delinquent instincts kick in. He starts fantasizing about a wild life filled with women, his face twisting into a manic, predatory grin. He decides he needs to go see his old friend, someone he calls Seda-chan. His focus shifts instantly from rehabilitation back to the excitement of the streets. Tatsuya stops in his tracks outside an 11 convenience store. Sitting on the curb next to a classic Kawasaki motorcycle is a man with a distinct pompadour hairstyle, looking like a classic street thug. The two men lock eyes, and the atmosphere immediately changes. It looks like Tatsuya's quiet new life is about to get complicated much sooner than expected. Tatsuya stands outside the convenience store, his eyes immediately locking onto a customized Kawasaki motorcycle. He notes the pimped-out FX model with interest, but his gaze quickly shifts to the owner sitting nearby. He assumes the guy must be an actual geezer around 30 years old, given the rough, weathered look on his face. Tatsuya can't help but stare, sizing up the man and his bike with a delinquent's natural curiosity. The tension spikes instantly as the man notices Tatsuya's stare. He glares back, clearly annoyed, as Tatsuya enters the store. Inside, Tatsuya tries to force himself to stay calm. He repeats to himself that he's on parole and isn't going to be the idiot who gets sent back to juvie on his very first day out. He realizes the old me would have gone for the guy's throat immediately, but he decides to let it go, just this once. Tatsuya walks out of the store holding a fresh pack of 7 Stars cigarettes. He looks at them with a manic sort of joy, realizing it's his first pack in 6 months. To him, this isn't just a smoke, it's a vital part of returning to society. However, his excitement is short-lived as he realizes he forgot to buy a lighter. As he turns to go back in, the man on the curb clicks his tongue in annoyance, further fueling the friction between them. The two men lock eyes again, and the atmosphere becomes suffocating. Tatsuya looks at the man with a cigarette dangling from his mouth, and the man stares back with a cold, challenging intensity. Neither of them is willing to look away first. It's a classic standoff between two predators in a small town, and the calm Tatsuya was trying to maintain is starting to evaporate. The man finally speaks, asking Tatsuya what his problem is. Tatsuya's old instincts kick in immediately. Out of pure force of habit, he gives a dark, intimidating look. Inside his head, a voice screams at him to quit it and just apologize before he gets into a fight that ruins his parole. He knows it's not too late to walk away, but his face is already locked in. The man isn't intimidated at all. He laughs at Tatsuya, telling him to go home and tickle his pickle. He mocks Tatsuya's shaking voice, calling out his failing poker face. He dismisses him entirely, saying that just because a kid smokes doesn't make him tough. Tatsuya stands there, head bowed, as a murderous rage begins to build up inside him. The insult to his pride is... Tatsuya snaps. He flashes a wide, crazed smile and starts hurling insults back, calling the man a grandpa and telling him to retire because his gangbanger act is pathetic. The man's cool exterior breaks instantly. He shouts back that he's actually only 17 years old, the same age as Tatsuya. This revelation only makes Tatsuya laugh harder, mocking how much worse that makes the man look. The man tells Tatsuya to follow him to a more private spot to settle this. The two move to a secluded area behind a building, away from the store cameras and witnesses. They stand several paces apart, facing each other in the dim light. The man takes a final drag of his cigarette, his muscular frame contrasting with Tatsuya's leaner build. The time for talking is clearly over, they've reached the point where only a fight will settle the score. The two move to a secluded area behind a building, away from the store cameras and witnesses. They stand several paces apart, facing each other in the dim light. The man takes a final drag of his cigarette, his muscular frame contrasting with Tatsuya's leaner build. The time for talking is clearly over, they've reached the point where only a fight will settle the score. We get a final, High detail look at Tatsuya's face. The rehabilitated facade is completely gone, replaced by the cold, sharp eyes of the head of the Komae Special Forces. The man across from him senses the sudden change in pressure and realizes he's not dealing with a normal kid. Tatsuya holds up a hand, stopping the man before the fight can even begin. He presents a bizarre condition. He wants the man to write a note stating that no matter how much he gets beaten up, he won't tell anyone. Tatsuya adds that if he wins, he gets the man's lighter. The man is completely baffled, shouting in confusion at these strange demands. Behind Tatsuya's calm facade, we see flashes of Ishito's face, a constant reminder that he is being watched. The scene shifts back to Tatsuya's time in juvie. He repeats his mantra, he never wants to go back there. We see him in his cell, surrounded by scraps of paper. He is hunched over a small table, his breathing heavy and labored. He picks up a small, square piece of paper, his eyes wide and unfocused as he prepares to fold it. This panel shows the grueling process of folding paper cranes in extreme detail. Tatsuya's hands are trembling, his eyes bloodshot from the strain. We see close-ups of his teeth gritting together as he forces himself to complete the task. This wasn't just a hobby, it was a repetitive, mind-numbing labor used as a form of punishment to break his spirit. The full scale of his vacation is revealed in this haunting wide shot. The entire floor of the cell is carpeted with thousands of white paper cranes. Tatsuya sits among them like a shadow, the walls of the cell stained and dark. This image captures the sheer mental endurance it took to survive solitary confinement without losing his mind completely. Back in the present, we see a massive close-up of Tatsuya's face. The soft, rehabilitated look he had at the restaurant is gone. His gaze is piercing and full of a cold, hard determination. He states his singular goal once more, I ain't ever going back to juvie. Tatsuya looks down, a dark shadow crossing his face as he concludes that as long as no one finds out about the fight, he'll be fine. He adjusts his footwear, ready to move. The man across from him has run out of patience, spitting out his cigarette and asking if they are actually going to do this or not. The final shot shows the discarded cigarettes on the pavement, the last remains of the piece. The action explodes. Tatsuya lunges forward with a speed that catches the man completely off guard. We see a high-impact close-up of Tatsuya's fist connecting squarely with the man's jaw. The force of the blow is immense, sending shockwaves through the air. This wide-action shot shows the full power of Tatsuya's special forces training. The punch sends the man reeling backward, his body twisting from the impact. A discarded cigarette and sparks fly through the air, emphasizing the raw violence of the strike. Tatsuya's form is perfect, he's not just swinging wildly, he's striking with intent. Tatsuya pauses, looking at his hand as blood splatters across the man's face. He realizes that force of habit took over again, his body reacted with maximum violence before his brain could stop it. The man hangs his head, blood dripping from his nose and mouth. Tatsuya notes with a bit of shock that the man was actually able to respond and brace himself for the hit, even if only slightly. The man wipes the blood from his mouth, his eyes narrowing as he realizes the caliber of opponent he's facing. He admits to himself that Tatsuya is incredibly strong. Tatsuya watches him closely, his own eyes dark and focused. He calls out, "Hey, man." As the tension between them reaches a boiling point, Tatsuya stares directly at the camera, his expression cold and unyielding. He repeats his demand for the man to write the note, stating that he won't continue the fight until his terms are met. The final shot transitions to a dark liquid, likely blood or oil, dripping onto the pavement, forming a dark puddle. Tatsuya's internal monologue concludes that despite his efforts to stay clean, the curtain is just beginning to rise on a new and undeniably exciting life. Tatsuya stands his ground outside the 11 store, his expression hardening as he repeats his demand. He's not moving until the man writes that note. He makes it clear, no signature, no fight. It's a strange move for a street brawl, but Tatsuya is playing a much bigger game than just defending his pride. The two move further into the secluded alleyway. It's a narrow, concrete corridor, the perfect place for a fight that needs to stay off the grid. Tatsuya faces his opponent, who looks just as ready to throw down. The quiet atmosphere of the town contrasts sharply with the brewing violence in this alley. The man, Kaname Abe, pauses for a moment, wiping his mouth and sizing Tatsuya up. He realizes Tatsuya isn't just some loudmouth kid. He turns his back for a second, warning Tatsuya not to run away. Tatsuya just watches him with a blank, almost bored expression, completely unfazed by Abe's attempt at intimidation. Abe makes good on his word. He produces a small notepad and a pen, scribbling out the statement Tatsuya demanded. He holds up the paper, which reads, "No matter how much I get beat up, I won't tell anyone." He signs it Abe Koname and dates it July 22. It's official. The legal shield Tatsuya wanted is now in his hands. Tatsuya looks at the note, genuinely surprised by the man's neat handwriting and his willingness to actually follow through. He admits to himself that Abe is surprisingly serious for a delinquent. A small, genuine smile crosses Tatsuya's face, not a predatory one this time, but one of actual respect for a guy with a bit of integrity. The formalities are over. Abe lunges forward with a massive, overhead strike. Tatsuya ducks and weaves, the speed of the attack creating a blur across the panel. We see Abe's fist narrowly missing Tatsuya's head as they begin a high-speed exchange of blows, neither one willing to give an inch. Tatsuya counterattacks with a lightning-fast strike of his own. The impact is shown in a dynamic close-up, with sparks and motion lines emphasizing the power behind his movements. Abe is forced onto the defensive, his eyes widening as he realizes Tatsuya's speed is even greater than he initially thought. Abe manages to land a heavy kick, but Tatsuya takes the hit and immediately retaliates. They are trading blows in a brutal, rhythmic fashion. We see blood splatter and sweat fly as the intensity of the fight ramps up. Tatsuya is pushed back against the wall, but he uses the momentum to launch himself back into the fray. Tatsuya catches Abe with a solid punch to the face. The impact is captured in a stark, high-detail panel that shows Abe's head snapping back. Tatsuya's eyes are locked onto his target, his focus absolute. He's not just fighting anymore, he's in the zone. Abe reels back from the hit, blood dripping from his nose. Both men are breathing heavily now, their shirts damp with sweat. They take a brief moment to reset, staring each other down in the narrow alley. The initial heat of the fight has settled into a grim, endurance-based struggle. The aftermath of the exchange is written all over their faces. Tatsuya wiped the blood from his mouth, a dark, bruised look settling in. He stares at Abe with a predatory intensity, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous level. He tells Abe he's been waiting for a challenge like this. Abe, clutching his side and spitting blood, can only think one thing as he looks at the manic grin on Tatsuya's face. This guy is a complete monster. The scene briefly cuts away from the violence, showing a small, stray puppy wandering near the alleyway. The creature is oblivious to the brutal fight happening just a few feet away. It's a moment of strange calm, focusing on the puppy's curiosity as it sniffs around the concrete, providing a stark contrast to the bloodstained pavement where Tatsuya and Abe are settling their scores. The focus shifts to Abe's customized Kawasaki motorcycle, parked nearby. The small puppy is now sitting right next to the back tire, dwarfed by the massive machine. This shot emphasizes the delinquent lifestyle Abe lead. The bike is a symbol of his status and his pride, now sitting silent as its owner struggles to stay on his feet in the alley. Back in the alley, the fight has reached a sudden conclusion. Abe is sprawled out on the concrete, completely unconscious. Tatsuya stands over him, his chest heaving as he catches his breath. He looks down at his fallen opponent, his own body covered in dirt and scrapes. The adrenaline is starting to fade, replaced by the heavy realization of what just happened. Tatsuya looks at his trembling, bloodstained hands in a daze. His face is a mess of cuts and bruises, his eyes unfocused. He starts to walk away, his footsteps heavy and uneven. But a weak voice stops him in his tracks. Abe is starting to stir, coughing up blood as he tries to call out. He isn't finished yet, even if his body has already given up. Abe is on his hands and knees, struggling just to keep his head up. Tatsuya turns back, asking if Abe really wants to keep going after taking a beating like that. In response, Abe feebly reaches into his pocket and tosses something toward Tatsuya. It's the lighter, the prize Tatsuya demanded before the fight began. Even in defeat, Abe is sticking to the deal they made. Tatsuya catches the lighter, looking at it with a mix of surprise and genuine respect. He realizes that despite his rough exterior, Abe really does have integrity. He's a man of his word. Abe, still barely conscious, mutters something about a promise being a promise. Tatsuya watches him, his earlier rage completely gone, replaced by a strange sense of kinship with this grandpa delinquent. Abe finally reveals the true reason he needed that note signed. He shouts out, his voice cracking with desperation, "Don't tell anyone that you beat me." He's not worried about the pain or the blood, he's worried about his reputation. Tatsuya can only stare in disbelief as the tough guy facade Abe spent the whole chapter building up completely collapses into a plea for secrecy. The full truth comes out. Abe admits that he is the vice head of a gang called Kilihito. For a high-ranking member like him to be seen losing a fight to a random kid would be a death sentence for his status. He's terrified of losing face. Tatsuya's expression shifts from respect back to a look of total disappointment. He realizes the legendary brawler he just fought is just as worried about his image as anyone else. Tatsuya lets out a long, exhausted sigh, concluding that the whole situation is so incredibly lame. He was starting to respect Abe, but seeing him beg to protect his ego has ruined the mood. Regardless, a deal is a deal. Tatsuya clicks the one lighter, sparks flying as he finally lights his long-awaited cigarette. He takes a deep drag, the smoke drifting into the night air as he leaves the vice head of Kilihito behind in the dirt. Tatsuya stands alone under the bright afternoon sun, exhaling a long plume of smoke. His clothes are torn, and his face is covered in the grime of the brawl, but he looks strangely at peace. He watches the clouds drift by, reflecting on the sheer absurdity of his first day of freedom. One day out, and he's already been in a life-or-death struggle, reminding him that no matter where he goes, chaos seems to follow him like a shadow. Abe slowly picks himself up, looking over at Tatsuya with a newfound curiosity. He admits that he actually just got out of juvenile hall himself today. Tatsuya listens, realizing they are in the exact same boat. He explains his own situation, that he's still on parole, and if he gets into any official trouble, his life is essentially over. The two sit in the quiet alley, the shared weight of their legal leashes creating a silent bond between them. Tatsuya gives a weary, bruised smile as he looks at his new acquaintance. He tells Abe that he'd really appreciate it if they could just keep everything that happened today between them. He doesn't want to be a good person, he just doesn't want to go back to the cage. Seeing the sincerity in Tatsuya's eyes, Abe realizes that this isn't just a tough guy act, it's a desperate attempt at survival. Abe looks at Tatsuya's battered face and can't help but let out a small sheesh. He finally understands why Tatsuya was so insistent on that written note earlier. Tatsuya sparks his cigarette again, the flame of the one lighter reflecting in his eyes. He asks the man for his name, deciding that anyone who can take a punch like that and still keep his word is worth knowing. Tatsuya introduces himself simply, Iguchi Tatsuya. The man introduces himself in return, Abe Komae. The two former enemies sit side by side against the concrete wall, both covered in blood and dust, sharing a quiet moment of mutual respect. They are two outcasts in a town that doesn't want them, finding a strange sort of friendship in the aftermath of a brutal fight. The Kawasaki motorcycle sits nearby, a silent witness to the start of an unlikely alliance. Tatsuya reflects on this moment, realizing that this was the day he met Komae. He looks up at the blazing sun, Abe's voice fading into the background as he mocks Tatsuya for being more of a grown-up than he looks. Tatsuya knows his new life is about to get incredibly intense. The curtain has officially risen on his time in this podunk town, and if this meeting is any indication, it's going to be a wild ride. It's been 1 week since Tatsuya began his new life in West Chiba. The transition hasn't been easy. Forced to move away from his hometown as a condition of his parole, he's now living under the watchful eye of his aunt. We see him hard at work, sweat pouring down his face as he focuses on his tasks. He introduces himself once more, Iguchi Tatsuya, reminding us that beneath the apron and the grime of the kitchen, he's still a man living on a very short leash. The reality of rehabilitation is far from glamorous. Tatsuya is shown squatting outside, surrounded by charcoal grills. He's covered in soot and sweat, fanning the flames to keep the heat steady. This is his world now, repetitive, manual labor in the heat of the sun. The no parking sign behind him and the mundane alleyway serve as a constant reminder of how small his world has become compared to his days leading the Komae outlaws. Tatsuya isn't completely alone in his exile. A small, familiar puppy, the one he calls Meatball, approaches him with an expectant woof. Tatsuya looks at the dog with a genuine, tired smile, noting that he was wondering when the little guy would show up for a meal. Even as he wipes the sweat from his brow, he tells the pup to hold its horses while he gets something ready. It's a rare moment of softness for the former gang leader. Tatsuya sets down a small tray of scraps, playfully scolding Meatball to eat his veggies too, as only eating meat isn't healthy. He pets the dog's head, asking if it's happy he took it in, and declares that they are friends now. But as the dog barks back, Tatsuya's old ego flares up for a second. He flashes a manic grin, telling the pup it better show some respect, because back home, they used to call him the mad dog of Komae. The playful mood shifts to a quiet, introspective one. Tatsuya watches the puppy eat, his expression turning somber. He thinks about the quiet, lonely streets of the town and asks the dog if being all alone is hard for it too. As night falls on the city, we see Tatsuya silhouetted against the urban lights, a lone figure squatting in the shadows. He's physically out of juvie, but the isolation of his new life is starting to weigh on him. Back inside the restaurant, the dinner rush is in full swing. The atmosphere is loud and chaotic, filled with the sounds of sizzling meat and shouting customers. Tatsuya is moving as fast as he can, balancing a tray of heavy beer bottles. However, the pressure gets to him. We see his eyes go wide in a moment of panic as the tray wobbles, followed by a loud crash. As the bottles shatter across the floor, the embarrassment is immediate. Tatsuya bows deeply, stammering an apology to his aunt as she comes over with a broom. She stays positive, telling Tat-chan not to worry and asking him to bring meat to another table instead. But the damage is done to his pride. He stands in the background, shadowed and frustrated, while his aunt notes to herself that at least he's trying. Tatsuya is realizing that serving customers might be a harder fight than any street brawl. Later that night, Tatsuya sits slumped in a dark corner of the kitchen, completely dejected. He mutters to himself that he's clearly not cut out for this kind of work and even considers quitting. But he quickly corrects himself. Quitting isn't an option as long as he's on parole. He stares at a lit cigarette, wondering what his old crew is up to back home. It's been over a year since he left his hometown, and the distance has never felt greater. Tatsuya tries to shake off the depression, sighing that there's no point in getting down about it. He decides he might as well use the quiet time to practice his serving skills. He imagines himself taking an order for beers and steaks, even pretending to turn down a tip with a polite "No, you're too kind." He's deep in the zone when the door suddenly slides open, and he freezes. A large, intimidating shadow stands in the doorway. The figure is Tatsuya's uncle, the man who actually owns the restaurant. He walks in without saying a word, his presence alone commanding respect. Tatsuya calls him Pops, noting that the man is a true craftsman who barely ever speaks. We see a close-up of the uncle lighting a cigarette, his face set in a stern, focused expression. He is the quiet force in Tatsuya's new life, a man who leads by example rather than words. Tatsuya stands in the kitchen, his heart hammering against his ribs as he watches his uncle, Pops, light a cigarette. The silence is deafening. Tatsuya's mind races. Did he catch the practice session? Did he see his nephew pretending to serve invisible customers? Tatsuya stands frozen, sweat beading on his forehead, while his uncle maintains an unreadable, stoic expression. The tension is broken only by the quiet chubo of the lighter. The silence is shattered by a sudden, sharp "ah" from Tatsuya. He looks up to see Kaname standing in the restaurant, his cheeks stuffed full of food. The former vice head of Kilihito looks completely different from the menacing brawler Tatsuya faced in the alley. He's focused entirely on the meal in front of him, his eyes wide as he stuffs another massive bite into his mouth with a muffled HNGPH. Tatsuya stares in disbelief, his mouth hanging open. What are you doing here?" he stammers. Kaname, unbothered, looks up from his bowl and fires back, "I could ask you the same thing, jack off." Tatsuya's aunt watches the two with a beaming smile, clearly amused by the sudden friction. She asks if they already know each other, oblivious to the fact that they nearly beat each other to death just a week ago. The confusion only grows as Tatsuya realizes Kaname is a regular. Kaname explains that he's been coming to Sanru with his friends for as long as he can remember. Tatsuya's aunt tells him he's done for the day since there are barely any customers left, so Tatsuya ends up sitting right across from his rival. He watches Kaname grill meat with a practiced hand, grumbling about why the guy is sitting at his table and eating his food. As they eat, Kaname's curiosity gets the better of him. He asks Tatsuya what he was really like back in his hometown. He assumes Tatsuya must have been a legendary fighter to land a blow like the one from their first meeting. Tatsuya shrugs it off, admitting that he actually lost a lot, at least 20 or 30 times. Kaname is stunned. It's not the answer he expected from the mad Dog of Komae. Tatsuya explains his philosophy. He's been picking fights since he was 11 years old, and in a year of 12 months, he probably spent 6 of them fighting. For him, losing wasn't the end of the world, it was just part of the process. Kaname's annoyance returns as Tatsuya shamelessly swipes a piece of meat from his grill. "Hey! Stop swiping my meat already!" he shouts, while Tatsuya's aunt laughs in the background, telling him no one likes a smartass. Later that night, the two stand outside the restaurant next to Kaname's Kawasaki. Tatsuya asks why he parked so far away, and Kaname admits he didn't want the noise to bother the customers. Tatsuya is once again struck by how serious Kaname is for a delinquent. The earlier tension has faded into a quiet, late-night conversation between two people who realize they have more in common than they thought. The piece is short-lived as Kaname leans in, his face hardening. "Just so we're clear, I still don't think I lost," he mutters. Tatsuya's eyes narrow instantly, his jaw tightening. The rehabilitated kitchen hand vanishes, replaced by the street-hardened fighter. "Say what? You wanna go again?" he challenges, the air between them suddenly thick with the threat of a rematch. Kaname backs off with a smirk, lighting another cigarette. "Maybe another time. I'm meeting my friends tonight," he says, dismissing the challenge. Tatsuya watches him walk away, calling him a chicken shit under his breath. He stands under the glow of the streetlights, the quiet of the night returning, but his mind is already buzzing with the realization that his life in this town is going to be anything but boring. Kaname stops at the end of the alley and looks back at Tatsuya, silhouetted against the night sky. "Tatsuya? You wanna come with me?" he calls out. Tatsuya stands there, the smoke from his own cigarette curling into the air. He's on parole, he's supposed to be staying out of trouble, and he's supposed to be turning over a new leaf. But as he looks at Kaname in the open road, the outlaw inside him makes the decision before his brain can even catch up. After a long pause, Tatsuya makes his choice. He looks at Kaname with a smirk and simply says, "Sure. Why not?" He knows he's breaking the rules, but the boredom of his new life is already starting to grate on him. He puts out his cigarette and prepares to step back into the world he promised to leave behind. The chapter ends with a high-energy action shot. Kaname kicks the Kawasaki motorcycle into gear, and Tatsuya hops on the back. They roar off into the night, the bike kicking up dust as they speed through the city streets. The quiet life is officially over as Tatsuya rides off with a high-ranking member of Kilihito. As they speed down the road, Kaname laughs and shouts a warning over his shoulder. He demands that Tatsuya promise not to start any fights where they are going, because it would be a giant pain in the ass. Tatsuya just smiles to himself, realizing the irony. He's the one on parole, yet his new friend is the one worried about keeping the peace. The mad dog is back on the move. Tatsuya rides through the city on Kaname's motorcycle as a philosophical narration begins. It explains that outside the normal laws and rules of the world, there exist people whose true value only becomes apparent in the shadows. These people aren't necessarily good or bad, they are just a part of the urban ecosystem. As long as humans have primal, animalistic instincts, their existence is inevitable. They live by a different code, one that Tatsuya is intimately familiar with. Tatsuya rides through the city on Kaname's motorcycle as a philosophical narration begins. It explains that outside the normal laws and rules of the world, there exist people whose true value only becomes apparent in the shadows. These people aren't necessarily good or bad, they are just a part of the urban ecosystem. As long as humans have primal, animalistic instincts, their existence is inevitable. They live by a different code, one that Tatsuya is intimately familiar with. They arrive at the Young Bowling Center, a massive building topped with a giant neon bowling pin. The parking lot is a sea of people and customized bikes, primarily Kawasaki's. The narration continues, noting that even in a world outside the law, other rules and traditions still apply. This is a designated neutral ground, a place where the local power dynamics are on full display but kept in check by a fragile peace. Tatsuya is genuinely impressed, his eyes wide with excitement. He's never seen anything like this in West Chiba. He exclaims that the place is huge and packed with people, admitting that Chiba's amazing. Kaname smirks, half joking as he asks if Tatsuya was mocking the town before. Tatsuya quickly clarifies that he thinks it's cool, his mad dog persona replaced by the genuine wonder of a newcomer seeing the local legend for the first time. As they walk through the crowd, Tatsuya notices the diverse groups of delinquents. Some are covered in tattoos, others wear stylized jackets with gang names. He's amazed that they aren't all at each other's throats and wonders if they are all part of some massive alliance. Kaname corrects him, explaining that it's not an alliance, they're all just following a specific set of rules that keep the town from descending into total chaos. Tatsuya realizes why Kaname was so insistent on him keeping his nose clean earlier. He asks if this no fighting rule is why he had to promise to behave. Kaname explains that for an outsider, it might seem like a chore, but for the locals who have lived here their whole lives, this social hierarchy is second nature. It's a tradition inherited from their predecessors, and it's treated with the utmost respect. Breaking it isn't just a fight, it's an insult to the history of the town. A collage of gang logos appears: Folly Wolf, Kilihito, S.I.D, and Ashura. Kaname explains that there have traditionally been 4 major gangs surrounding West Chiba. A while back, there was a massive great war involving all 4 factions. We see snippets of old newspaper headlines describing the tragedy, noting that several people were killed and many more arrested. The bowling alley parking lot was actually one of the primary battlegrounds of that war. The script shows a chaotic flashback of the war, silhouetted figures fighting with bats, cars being smashed, and bodies littering the pavement. To stop the rising casualty numbers, the police finally intervened, forcing all 4 teams to agree to a non-aggression pact. Back in the present, the bowling alley looks peaceful, but the narration warns that 2 or 3 generations later, that peace is becoming harder and harder to maintain. The tension in the air is palpable. Kaname looks somber as he explains that the no-fighting rule exists solely to prevent another tragedy like the one from the past. He mentions that many gangs have special rules, some ban women, others ban drugs. It's not that they're trying to be straight edge or good kids, it's usually the result of a specific accident or loss that happened years ago. We see a dead cicada on the ground, a symbol of the fleeting and fragile nature of the peace they currently enjoy. Tatsuya, leaning back with his hands behind his head, asks what happens if someone actually breaks the rules. Kaname gives a dark, knowing smile. He explains that usually, your own gang would punish you to keep the peace. But then he drops the real threat: if you're not part of any gang, wouldn't everyone get to punish you? Tatsuya, looking a bit sweat-dropped and annoyed, reminds Kaname that he already said he'd stay out of trouble because of his parole. The two share a moment of tension, realizing that Tatsuya is currently a man without a shield in a very dangerous playground. Kaname stands with a cigarette in hand, his expression unreadable as he drops a heavy truth about the current state of the streets. He notes that while fear of the law exists, that's not what's actually keeping the peace lately. He hints at a certain someone whose influence is the real reason people are sticking to the rules. Tatsuya looks on, confused, realizing there are deeper layers to this territory than he first thought. The scene shifts back to the Sunru restaurant, miles away from the chaos of the bowling alley. Tatsuya's aunt is in a panic, realizing Tak-chan isn't in his room and hasn't come home. The contrast is sharp. While Tatsuya is exploring a world of violence, his family is back home, terrified that the boy they're trying to rehabilitate has already slipped through their fingers. Tatsuya's uncle remains silent, his face etched with a mix of exhaustion and worry. The aunt recalls seeing Tatsuya come home all beat up the week prior, but admits she felt a strange sense of relief knowing he was with Kaname. She views their relationship as a typical, albeit rough, friendship, hoping that Kaname is the one keeping Tatsuya grounded. The uncle finally speaks, acknowledging that Tatsuya has been working hard since his release. He understands the boy's need to spread his wings after being locked up, but the weight of reality settles over them both. He reminds her, and the reader, of the ultimate stakes: Tatsuya is still on parole. One wrong move doesn't just mean a fight, it means going back to prison. Back at the Young Bowling Center, the atmosphere shifts from philosophical to high energy. A group of rugged delinquents immediately spots Kaname, shouting greetings and showing him immense respect. Kaname towers over the frame, looking every bit the vice head of Kilihito, basking in the recognition of his territory. Tatsuya is taken aback by the reception, calling Kaname a total celebrity. Kaname can't help but gloat, wearing a smug grin as he asks Tatsuya what he expected. Tatsuya plays it off with his usual brashness, calling Kaname an asshole for showing off, but the underlying tension of being surrounded by so many active delinquents is starting to prickle. The duo heads toward the restrooms. As Kaname steps inside to take a leak, Tatsuya waits outside, leaning against the wall and grumbling about Kaname's pompous attitude. However, the narration takes a dark, ominous turn, explaining that within the harsher laws of the delinquent world, there exists a type of freedom that is both violent and strangely comfortable. Suddenly, the peace of the neutral ground is shattered. A new figure, with wide, bulging eyes and a manic, terrifying expression, looms directly into Tatsuya's personal space. He demands to know Tatsuya's relationship with Kaname. The chapter ends on this high-tension note, proving that even in a no-fighting zone, the threat of violence is never more than an inch away. The night continues at the Young Bowling Center, its iconic giant pin glowing against the starry sky. Inside, Tatsuya Iguchi remains leaning against the wall, trying to maintain his cool. He calmly clicks a heart-pattern lighter, lighting a cigarette and completely ignoring the aggressive shouting of the person standing directly in front of him. The persistent yelling of "You listening to me?" falls on deaf ears as Tatsuya focuses solely on the flame. The intruder is revealed to be a young man with a buzz cut and a piercing gaze, standing defiantly in the middle of the bowling alley floor. He wears a simple white t-shirt and athletic shorts, looking like a local who is comfortable enough to start trouble in this sacred territory. The crowd in the background watches with a mix of curiosity and boredom, used to the constant posturing of the West Chiba youth. The tension breaks into a full-on confrontation. The boy, identified by bystanders as KGMI, leans in close, his face twisted with irritation. He repeats his demand. "I said, what's your relationship with Kaname-kun?" Nearby delinquents whisper that Amai is a total loose cannon and that this is a regular occurrence for him. Tatsuya continues to flicker his lighter, seemingly unbothered by the threat. Amai loses his patience entirely, leaning into Tatsuya's personal space. He screams, "Are you messing with me? How much longer are you gonna keep ignoring me?" The close-up on Tatsuya's eye shows a slight shift, a spark of the mad dog coming back to the surface. He finally looks up from his cigarette, the silence between them becoming heavy and dangerous. Tatsuya suddenly breaks into a wide, disarming grin that catches him completely off guard. He laughs, "Oh, you're talking to me?" With a casual apology, he explains his mind was elsewhere and that he only recently met Komae. But just as the tension seems to dip, Imai reaches out and aggressively grabs Tatsuya by the collar of his black shirt. Tatsuya reminds Imai that fighting is forbidden on the premises, but Imai isn't interested in the truce. He sneers that he isn't buying any of that garbage Tatsuya is spouting and that once they take one step outside, all bets are off. He begins to drag Tatsuya toward the exit, but the movement is abruptly halted by a deep, authoritative voice asking, "What on earth are you two doing?" Both boys freeze as they realize someone significant has arrived. Abe Komae towers over them, looking down at the two with a stern, imposing expression. The sheer size difference between Komae and the others is emphasized as he stands with his hands in his pockets, his presence alone commanding the entire hallway. Tatsuya remains leaned against the wall, looking more annoyed than rescued. Komae's face softens into a mocking smile as he addresses the intruder. "Keiji. What in the world are you doing to my friend?" Imai's bravado vanishes instantly, he begins to sweat and stutter, realizing he's crossed a line. Komae delivers a swift, disciplinary strike, reminding Keiji that there is absolutely no fighting allowed inside the center. Komae delivers a crushing ultimatum: if Keiji won't listen to the rules, he'll never be allowed to join Kilihito. Keiji, now looking desperate and submissive, claims he doesn't care about joining a gang, but Komae isn't finished. He demands that Keiji return the ring Komae gave him, effectively threatening to cut all ties. The close-up of the signet ring on Keiji's finger shows just how much that symbol means to him. Keiji breaks down, clutching his hands together and begging for forgiveness. Please, anything but that." Komae doesn't let him off easily. He points toward Tatsuya and barks that Keiji shouldn't just apologize to him, but to Tatsuya as well. The chapter's opening sequence ends with Keiji cowering in front of the mad dog, who looks on with a bored, almost pitying expression. Keiji Imai remains bowed low, trembling as he offers a desperate apology to Tatsuya. Tatsuya looks down at him with a flat, bored expression, seemingly unimpressed by the display of submission. He casually tells Keiji not to worry about it, claiming he isn't angry. Komae, satisfied that the order has been restored, tells Keiji to go off and play somewhere else, sending the younger boy scurrying away. Komae turns back to Tatsuya, offering a genuine apology for the trouble. Tatsuya plays it off with a laugh, but the narrator notes that his mind is already elsewhere. Tatsuya asks what Keiji's problem was, noting that the kid looked incredibly irritated. Komae smirks, jokingly asking if Tatsuya has turned over a new leaf by being so patient. He explains he's just following the local rules to avoid making Tatsuya look bad. As Keiji walks away, Komae provides some background on him. He describes Keiji as a 16-year-old with an incredibly short fuse who has been following Komae around since middle school. Despite being an idiot and a handful, Komae admits that Keiji is actually better now than he used to be, hinting at the rough environment they all grew up in. Komae looks at Tatsuya with a knowing glint in his eye, admitting that while Keiji is troublesome, he at least has guts and spirit. Tatsuya echoes the sentiment internally, but the mood is cut short. Komae realizes it's time for a Kilihito team meeting and tells Tatsuya he'll have to entertain himself for a bit. Tatsuya casually waves him off. Tatsuya enters the restroom, a space covered in aggressive graffiti and delinquent tags. The silence of the room allows his mad dog persona to bubble to the surface. He tries to light his cigarette, his hand trembling slightly with a mix of adrenaline and suppressed rage. He stares at his reflection, the calm facade he maintained in front of Komae beginning to crack. The suppression finally snaps. In a sudden, violent motion, Tatsuya slams his hand against the wall and kicks a trash can with enough force to send it flying. He lets out a silent, internal scream of frustration, calling Keiji an annoying little brat. The intense, motion-blurred panels capture the raw energy Tatsuya has been holding back all night. A terrifying close-up reveals Tatsuya's true face, his eyes wide and bloodshot, a manic, predatory grin spreading across his lips. He isn't scared or annoyed, he's starving for a fight. He curses his own restraint, thinking that he should have struck Keiji while he had the chance. The transition from reformed Parole to Mad Dog is complete. Tatsuya leans against the sinks, panting heavily. He mutters that he feels like he's losing his mind. His eyes drift to the stall doors, which are covered in crude, insulting drawings and lewd graffiti. One particularly ridiculous drawing catches his eye, and the absurdity of it causes his rage to pivot. He vents his frustration on the vandalism, shouting about who could possibly find such garbage appealing. After calming down slightly, Tatsuya leans back over a railing, sighing about how much he seriously wants to mess somebody up. He reminds himself of the reality of his situation. He's on parole. He can't fight even if he wanted to, regardless of how much he mocks the non-aggression pact the local gangs have created. Suddenly, his internal monologue is interrupted by a familiar, aggressive voice outside. "You wanna fight, huh?" Tatsuya looks over the railing to see KGMI once again, this time surrounded by a group of other delinquents near the vending machines. KG looks completely unhinged, screaming at someone out of view. A dark, twisted smile returns to Tatsuya's face. He clicks his lighter one more time, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous light. "Well, look what we have here," he thinks, realizing that his opportunity for a legal outlet for his rage might have just arrived. The scene shifts to a desolate parking lot outside a mammoth pachinko parlor, far enough away from the bowling alley to be outside the protection of the non-aggression pact. Imai stands alone, facing down four members of a rival group. He wears a manic, wide-eyed grin, confidently declaring that no one will get in their way here. The rivals are confused by his boldness, asking if he really wants to fight them that badly despite being outnumbered 4-1. The scale of the confrontation is revealed in a wide shot. Imai is dwarfed by the four delinquents, who look seasoned and physically imposing. The graffiti-covered walls and overgrown weeds of the lot emphasize the lawlessness of this neutral zone. Imai's expression turns chillingly dark as he admits he doesn't just want to fight, he wants to end them. He tells them plainly that he will never forgive them for what they've done. Hidden nearby behind some bushes, Tatsuya watches the scene unfold, his blackout shirt blending into the shadows. He's completely unbothered by the unfair odds, mockingly thinking that Imai is going to get his tail kicked 6 ways to Sunday. He even jokes to himself that the rivals should do him a favor and put the brat in the hospital for a year. However, a small part of him is genuinely curious, what could have sparked such a deep, violent hatred? The lead rival, a large man with a tattoo near his eye, demands to know who Imai is affiliated with. Imai's response is calm yet provocative, the Koname gang. The mention of Koname's name sends a ripple through the group, while Tatsuya watches from the shadows, a bead of sweat forming on his head as he realizes Imai is using Koname's reputation as a shield, or a weapon. The rivals erupt into mocking laughter. They jeer at the idea of a Koname gang, calling it a fake club or a fan club for the vice head of Kilihito. They laugh at how lame it is for a stalker like Imai to be claiming affiliation with someone who probably doesn't even want him around. Tatsuya, hiding in the brush, can't help but chuckle at the insult, finding the situation hilarious. The lead rival stops laughing and leans in with a cruel smirk. He decides that instead of just bullying Imai, they're going to turn him into their personal ATM from now on. Tatsuya's internal monologue eggs them on, silently screaming for them to kill his ass and stop talking. But Imai isn't intimidated. He closes his eyes and laughs, a pure, joyous sound that signals he's exactly where he wants to be. In a sudden, fluid motion, Imai's hand flashes forward. He isn't empty-handed. He draws a telescopic steel baton, the metal clicking into place with a sharp, industrial sound. The lead rival's eyes widen in shock as he realizes he brought words to a weapon fight. A black cat nearby hisses and arches its back, sensing the immediate shift in lethality. Imai strikes with terrifying speed. Before the lead rival can even raise his arms, the steel baton connects squarely with his forehead. Blood sprays across the pavement as the man's head snaps back, a guttural escaping his lips. The sheer force of the blow is enough to stagger the much larger man instantly. The other three rivals stand frozen in shock, stammering in confusion as their leader collapses. From the bushes, Tatsuya's mocking attitude vanishes. He realizes that Imai isn't just a loud-mouthed kid, he's a calculated combatant. What are they, stupid? Tatsuya thinks. Of course he's carrying a weapon. He's all by himself. Imai doesn't give them a chance to recover. He lunges at the next rival, swinging the baton with a focused, clinical aggression. The rival barely manages a coup. As he tries to dodge the whistling steel, the scene ends with Imai in mid-motion, a blurred whirlwind of violence that proves why Koname kept such a close eye on him. The tension in the parking lot boils over into pure action. Imai moves with a terrifying level of focus, wielding his telescopic baton not just as a club, but as a precision tool. With a sharp whooshed whip, he dismantles the group of four, striking with zero hesitation. Tatsuya watches from the shadows, genuinely impressed by the kid's cold-blooded efficiency. The scene shifts to a local game center where Koname, the vice head of Kilihito, is on the hunt. He's looking for the guy he was with earlier, and the local punks are quick to show him respect. Even in a room full of delinquents, Kaname's presence is heavy. One of the guys points him toward the restrooms, sensing that the big man isn't in the mood for small talk. The word on the street reaches Kaname, Imai is out there getting into another scrap. Kaname reacts with a mix of shock and frustration, clearly tired of the kid's constant antics. Since Imai isn't an official member of Kilihito yet, his reckless behavior is a wild card that the leadership has to deal with. The punks describe him as a nice guy who has gone so far past nice that he's become a total engine of violence. Back at the Fever 777 parking lot, the aftermath is brutal. One of the attackers lies face down in the dirt, gasping for air. Ha. Ha. While his friends realize they've been completely outclassed. They thought they were just messing around, but Imai treated it like a life or death struggle. The group is left shaken, realizing they just tried to bully a natural-born fighter. Tatsuya stays low in the brush, watching a black cat wander through the wreckage of the fight. A cigarette dangles from his lips as he remains coolly detached from the chaos. He's seen enough to know the attackers were incompetent, noting that it took them far too long to realize they were in over their heads. The rivals finally retreat, limping away into the darkness. One of them clutches his head, his shoes scuffing the pavement with a dry shrrk as he realizes he needs immediate medical attention. Imai stands alone in the center of the lot, his silhouette framed against the night sky, looking like a grim guardian of the pavement. The adrenaline starts to fade, and the physical toll of the fight sets in. Imai is hunched over, his hand trembling with a low prrru. As he clutches a rock in a white-knuckled grip. He lets out a pain gwa. Just as his friends rush to his side. They're stunned by the amount of blood on him, but Imai isn't finished yet. Imai stands tall, his eyes burning with a fierce, protective loyalty. He's breathing heavily, as he makes a pained vow. He will never forgive anyone who speaks ill of Kaname-kun. Tatsuya, watching from the periphery, finally understands the motivation behind the madness. This wasn't just a random brawl, it was a defense of someone Imai deeply respects. Imai's at his breaking point, his face battered and blood dripping from his nose as he gasps for air. Ha. Despite the exhaustion, his eyes are fixed with a terrifying intensity. He makes it clear that he will never forgive anyone who talks trash about Kaname. Tatsuya watches the scene unfold, his own expression unreadable as he takes in the sheer weight of Imai's loyalty to the Kilihito vice head. The fury erupts. Imai screams at the top of his lungs, his face contorted in a mix of rage and pain. The reason for the entire 1-on-4 slaughter finally comes to light: someone called Kaname an old fart. To anyone else, it's a minor insult, but to Imai, it's a declaration of war. His scream echoes through the parking lot, GWAA. As the chapter title hits the screen, the atmosphere shifts from high-tension drama to absolute disbelief. Tatsuya's jaw practically hits the floor, his eyes wide as he realizes the noble reason for this brutal brawl was just a sensitive comment about Kaname's age. Even the rivals look confused. One of them wonders if the people in Chiba are just completely nuts, as Imai continues his desperate, lunge-heavy assault on the group. The scene cuts back to the arcade restroom, where the aftermath of a different kind of violence is visible. A door has been completely torn off its hinges. Kaname and his associate stand among the urinals, searching for Tatsuya and Imai. The associate asks what Kaname intends to do about Imai, noting that while Kaname has cleaned up the kid's messes so far, things are escalating. The conversation turns serious. The associate warns Kaname that if Imai keeps this up, the boss, the 7th generation head of Kilihito, Tatsuya Atsushi, is going to find out, and it won't be pretty. Kaname looks troubled, acknowledging that having the top brass catch wind of Imai's unsanctioned brawls would be a massive headache. The shadow of the Kilihito leadership looms large over the conversation. Back at the Fever 777 lot, the rain begins to fall, washing over the grim scene. Imai is face down on the pavement, his breath coming in ragged, wet gasps. Ha. He's finally been grounded. Tatsuya stands by the fence with a black cat at his feet, crossing his arms as he watches the group of rivals surround the fallen Imai. The mad dog seems to be weighing whether to stay a spectator or intervene. Tatsuya reflects on Imai's performance. He admits the kid has plenty of guts and spirit, even if it didn't save him from the numbers game. He realizes Kaname must have his hands full dealing with a fan as loyal and violent as Imai. As the rain intensifies, Tatsuya turns to walk away, his silhouette fading into the stormy night. The rivals aren't finished with Imai yet. They move in to rob him, mocking him as they dig through his wallet. To their confusion, they don't find a stack of cash, just some loose change and a massive supply of protection. Even in his semi-conscious state, Imai manages to spit out a final, defiant insult. 2. telling them exactly where they can shove their victory. One of the attackers spots something valuable, a ring on Imai's finger. He grabs Imai's hand, admiring the jewelry while the others pin the kid down. Imai's eyes snap open, a look of pure desperation hitting him as he realizes what they're about to take. He lets out a sharp "ah" as he tries to pull away, but he's pinned firmly against the wet pavement. The struggle turns frantic. Imai thrashes against the three men holding him, screaming that he'll wreck them if they don't let go. With a sickening "pak key," they pry the ring from his finger. Imai's defiance turns to pure panic. He begs them for anything but that. As the thief holds up the prize with a triumphant bingo, Imai is left crawling in the mud, reaching out for the one thing he clearly can't afford to lose. The brutality peaks as a heavy strike connects, sending blood spray across the panel with a wet SPLA tut. Imai is sent reeling, his body twisting in midair before he slams into the wet pavement. Thud crunch. The rivals have no mercy, deciding it's time to go now that they've taken what they wanted. Imai can only let out a pain "gah." NGHF. As he tries to pull himself up, his voice cracking as he tells them to wait. Imai is completely broken, groveling in the mud as the rain pours down. He's no longer the fierce fighter from the parking lot, he's a desperate kid begging for his most prized possession. He pleads with them to give it back, his voice trembling, "Bo tut. Bo tut," as he reveals that the ring means everything to him. The rivals just look down at him with cold, triumphant smirks, unaffected by his desperation. A flashback takes us to a younger Imai, looking cleaner but no less intense. He's standing near a train station, facing off against a group of older students. The tension is palpable as he locks eyes with a blonde-haired boy. The atmosphere is thick with the kind of schoolyard rivalry that defines a delinquent's early years. Imai looks ready to erupt even back then, his hands clenched in frustration. The flashback continues in a narrow, graffiti-covered alley. Imai is on the ground, being cornered by three older punks. He looks up at a tall, shadowed figure, Kaname, who has just stepped into the fray. The power dynamic is clear. Kaname is the calm in the center of Imai's storm. Imai's face is a mask of shock and awe as he realizes someone has finally stepped in to change the odds. The mood shifts to a rare moment of levity in the flashback. Imai and Kaname are sitting against a fence, the aftermath of a scuffle visible but forgotten. Imai is laughing hysterically, his mouth wide open, while Kaname looks on with a smirk. It's a foundational moment of bonding, showing the origin of the fierce loyalty Imai carries today. Back in the past, Kaname holds up a ring, the very same one the rivals just stole. Imai looks at it with intense focus, his face turning from anger to wide-eyed surprise. The scene transitions into a training moment, with Kaname coaching Imai on how to throw a proper punch. It's clear the ring was a gift or a symbol of Imai graduating into Kaname's inner circle. Kaname's voice echoes from the past, telling Imai that the ring is his once he gets his act together a bit. It's a promise of a future and a place to belong. Imai looks at the ring with a new sense of purpose. The panels transition through the changing seasons, from bare branches to full autumn leaves, symbolizing the time Imai spent earning his place by Kaname's side. The memory concludes with Imai finally receiving the ring. His face is split by a massive, genuine grin, the happiest we've ever seen him. We see the ring in a display case on a wall, surrounded by photos of the crew and a note that reads "Abe Kaname." It wasn't just jewelry, it was his proof of existence within Kilihito. The reality of the present hits like a physical blow. Imai is sprawled in the mud, the rain washing the blood from his face. Za AAA. He's lost his proof. His hand reaches out weakly into the empty air, his fingers twitching in the puddles. His final words are a broken apology. "I'm sorry, Kaname-kun." As he loses consciousness in the storm, Tatsuya stands alone in the rain, his silhouette framed against a massive X on the wall behind him. His inner monologue turns philosophical, reflecting on those who stray from the normal path. He notes that while they appear free, they carry a huge responsibility to the people they choose to follow. Nearby, the rivals walk away, laughing and gloating about how much they can sell the diamond ring for. Tatsuya continues his dark reflection, noting that the other side of indulging your desires is an everlasting hell. He clutches his head as the weight of his own parole and history presses down on him. As he moves, the rivals finally notice him, realizing there is someone else in the lot. The confrontation is set. Tatsuya stands with his back to the camera, the blackout logo on his shirt clear as day against the falling rain. The group of rivals stands across from him, looking confused and slightly annoyed. The parking lot has become a stage for a new fight. Tatsuya turns his head, his eyes cold and predatory. The mad dog has finally decided to bark. The lead rival looks back, his own face scarred and aggressive, demanding to know, "Who the heck are you?" Like and follow for more manga content. If you want a part 2, let me know in the comments.